Thank you, Madam Speaker. Very proud, as always, to rise in this House and speak for the incredible people of Timmins James Bay. So we're here to talk about C-11, Bill C-11. So we have to step back into the last Parliament where we had Bill C-10, which this is the update of, and what was then Bill C-11, which was supposed to be about addressing the long outstanding need to bring Canada's laws up to standard in dealing with the tech giants. So this Bill C-11 was the old Bill C-10, which should have been pretty straightforward. I mean, who doesn't want Facebook to finally start paying tax? This is a company that made $117 billion in profit last year, up $31 billion in a single year, and we're not paying tax. So that was what Bill C-10 was supposed to do, but then it was the Minister of Environment, our modern Minister of Environment, who was then Minister of Heritage, who turned it into a total political dumpster fire. And thank God it was so bad they had to call an election just to get that thing off the table. So now they brought it back. At the time then, C-11 was supposed to be the privacy bill, a pretty straightforward thing. But that was another dumpster fire because the privacy commissioner had to come out and say their plan to update privacy rights would actually undermine basic Canadian privacy in the realm of digital technology, particularly the fact that the privacy commissioner found this American company, Clearview AI, to have broken Canadian law for their illegal use of images and facial recognition technology. And in response, the Liberals were going to rewrite the rules so it would be easier for Clearview AI to break the law rather than for the privacy commissioner to protect Canadians. So they had to call an election to erase all that. So now the Liberals are given, as the Liberals have so many times in the past been given, one more chance. The Deus Ex Machina, God comes down and gives them a chance to do things all over again. So we're looking at this Bill C-11, and I can say the one thing about Bill C-11 is they fixed a lot of the problems with the previous dumpster fire, maybe moving the minister, although God help the planet that he's now looking after the environment. But that's just my own personal thoughts from having read his ridiculous environment plan today. What he was going to do for culture, he's now doing to our environment. So having said that, I would say that there's a couple of key issues we need to be looking at. We need to be looking at the need for Canada's legislation to actually address the right of artists to get paid in a digital realm. And I think for too long in Canada, we sort of pat our artists on the head and we all talk about the favorite TV shows we had growing up. I mean, God, one of the Liberals was talking about the Pokeroo. Art policy should not be something that we just pat our artists on the head. This is an industry. It is one of our greatest exports. We are not promoting arts as an export and promoting our artists to do the work that they need to do. And we saw from COVID the devastating impacts on Canada's arts industry, on theatre, on musicians, on the tech people, the highly skilled tech people who went over 2 years without working. We really need to address this. And one of the areas where they have been so undermined is online. Let's talk about Spotify. It's basically a criminal network in terms of its robbing artists blind. The amount of sales that you need to have on Spotify to pay a single bill is so ridiculous, no Canadian artist can meet that. We have streaming services that are making record fortunes. So it is a reasonable proposition to say you're making an enormous amount of profit, you have a market where you're not having any real competition, and some of that money, and this is always the Canadian compromise, some of that money needs to go back into the development of arts so that we can continue to build the industry. And Madam Speaker, the one thing I've also come to realize, what the digital realm gives us and what streaming services gives us is the ability to compete with our arts internationally in a scale that we've never had before. So if we're actually investing, let's not look at it in a parochial manner that they're going to, a lot as they used to do in the old broadcasters, 1 hour on prime time a week to have a Canadian show on. Let's actually invest so we can do the foreign deals so that, why is it that I can watch an incredible detective show from Iceland on Netflix And people in Iceland are not seeing an incredible detective show from Canada. So this is what we need to be doing. This is a reasonable position to take. And I can tell you, with the profit that Facebook and Google are making, they can pay into the system. That is a simple thing. They have unprecedented market share. So I'd like to go to the second point, which is dealing with the tech giants, and something that I've worked with. 2018, our all-parliamentary committee came up with numerous recommendations. And I have to speak as a recovering digital utopian. Because there was a time when I believed that when we let all these platforms come, if we stood back and we didn't put any regulations on, they would create some kind of new market promised land. But what we saw was that those dudes from Silicon Valley who were making YouTube in their parents' garage morphed into an industrial power that's bigger than anything we've ever seen. There's a term they call kill zone of innovation, that these companies have become so rich, so powerful, an unprecedented corporate strength that dwarfs anything that we've ever seen in the history of capitalism. Companies like Facebook, when Facebook gets a $5 billion fine, they don't even blink. It doesn't bother them. When the Rohingya are launching a £150 billion lawsuit for the mass murder caused because of the exploitation of Facebook's platform, you realize you're dealing with companies that are so much beyond, they don't believe that domestic law applies to them. So there has to be some level of obligation. And I have worked with the international parliamentarians in London. There's been meetings in Washington, trying to see how we can actually address the unprecedented power. Because one of the things that changed fundamentally when we saw the growth of this power, there used to be a principle that the telecoms would always tell us parliamentarians that, we shouldn't be blamed for what's on the content because, they call them the pipes are dumb. We just send out the content and people choose. But people don't choose the content on Facebook and YouTube because of the algorithms. And it's the algorithms that make them culpable and responsible. I would refer you to Congresswoman Maloney, who demanded Facebook explain how many of these stolen bot pages were driving misinformation during the convoy crisis here in Ottawa. And she said, this is Congresswoman Maloney writing that Facebook's history of amplifying toxic content, extremism, and disinformation, including from Russia and other foreign actors, is well known. It's no wonder that some of the members of the Conservative backbench are so defensive about this bill. Oh my God, this is their main source of news. What are they going to do if we actually start dealing with bot pages that they think is, something that came down from the promised land? But as parliamentarians, we have an obligation to address bot accounts. We have an obligation to hold these companies to account. So what does that mean? Well, number one, it's about algorithmic accountability. Because I don't care what someone watches on Facebook or YouTube, that's their business. But if the algorithm is tweaked to show you what you would not otherwise see, Facebook and are making decisions for you. I would refer my colleagues to Tristan Harris, the great thinker on digital technology, who spoke to our committee in 2018, and he said that technology is overriding the limits of the human animal. We have a limited ability to hold a certain amount of information in our head at the same time, and we have a limited ability to discern the truth. So we rely on shortcuts, like thinking that what that person says is true or what that person says is false. But what he says about the algorithm is that the algorithm has seen 2 billion other people do the same thing, and it anticipates what you are going to do. So it starts to show you content. And what they've learned from the business model of Facebook and YouTube is that extremist content causes people to spend more time online. They're not watching cat videos. They're watching more and more extremist content. And so you actually have an effect on social interaction, and you also have an effect on democracy. So that is not part of this bill. But what our all-party committee had recommended was that we need to address the issue of algorithmic accountability. We need to address the issue of the privacy rights of citizens to use online networks without being tracked in surveillance capitalism. And with this bill, we need to ensure that these tech giants who are making unprecedented amount of money actually put some money back into the system so that we can create an art sector that can compete worldwide. Thank you. I'll be here all week, by the way.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. L'honorable député d'Alfred Pelham.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Une question pour mon collègue. Ce projet de loi assure que les diffuseurs et les plateformes de diffusion vont contribuer au soutien direct des créateurs francophones, racialisés, autochtones, LGBTQ2 et handicapés. Est-ce que mon collègue pourrait nous parler un peu plus de cet aspect? Merci, Madame la Présidente.
The honourable member for Timmins, James Bay.
Je vous remercie pour la question. C'est très important parce que le rôle de la communauté des arts pour la communauté francophone, c'est essentiel pour le Canada, pour le Québec et dans ma région de la Nord-Ontario, c'est une région très fière, franco-ontarienne, et c'est essentiel pour la communauté d'avoir accès au milieu numérique. Et pour ça, c'est essentiel pour Facebook, pour Netflix, pour YouTube, de mettre en place le soutien pour le développement de la communauté francophone au Canada et pour la communauté francophone partout dans le monde d'accès les arts du Canada.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Coast of Bay, Central Notre Dame.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank the member for Timmins for her speech. I mean, we have a lot of friends and family from Coast of Bay, Central Notre Dame, actually living in the Timmins area and working hard in the resource industry, bringing new dollars into the economy. But I was a bit sad that he had to insult Conservatives after the previous speaker chastised us about not insulting each other. So I guess that respect is not really there. So, you know, he made reference to tin hats and things like that. I was feeling really bad. And he talked a lot about marmalade and he couldn't spell jam. So after all this, I don't know which way my colleague across the way is going to vote. Is he going to stay in line with the marriage, or is he going to cheat like they did earlier today in our vote?
Good question.
The honourable member for Timmins, James Bay.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to thank my honourable colleague. At least his relatives work hard for a living, and I'm glad they're working in the mines and the forestry industry in Timmins. You know, Madam Speaker, one of the real great concerns that we have in the digital realm is the dumbing down of conversation to a level that it would fit on a Facebook meme. So the fact that my honourable colleague's thinking we're talking about marmalade and jam when we're actually talking about the digital marketplace, to me, is really concerning. Maybe you should spend a little less time online, come up to Timmins, James Bay, and we could show them what real working people do.